Lux Occult is part of the Green Mushroom Podcast Network.
I bring ye wine from above, from the vats of the storied sun, for every one of your love and life for every one. Ye shall dance on hill and level, ye shall sing in hollow and height. In the festival, mystical revel, the rapturous bacchanal rite. The rocks and trees are yours, and the waters under the hill. By the midnight of that which endures, the holy heaven of will. I kindle a flame like a torrent, to rush from star to star. Your hair as a comet's horrent, you shall see things as they are. I lift the mask of matter, I open the heart of man, for I am a force to shatter the caste that hindereth Pan. Your love shall lap up slaughter, and dabbled with the roses of blood, each desperate darling daughter shall swim in the fervid flood. I bring ye laughter and tears, the kisses that foam and bleed, the joys of a million years, the flowers that bear no seed. My life is bitter and sterile, its flame is a wandering star. Ye shall pass in pleasure and peril across the mystic bar that is set for wrath and weeping against the children of earth. But ye in singing and sleeping shall pass in measures and mirth. I lift my wand and wave you through hill to hill of delight. My rosy rivers lave you, innermost lustral light. I lead you, Lord of the maze, in the darkness free of the sun, in spite of the spite that is days. We are wed, we are wild, we are one. That is Dionysus by the great beast himself, Aleister Crowley. Hello and welcome to Lux Occult. This is the podcast where we gleefully taunt the mundane, butcher the Latin and most other languages, and we also discuss a variety of occult, esoteric, and adjacent topics, exploring the intersections of magic, art, science, philosophy, technology, performance, and so much more. This is indeed occultism for everyone. I'm your host, Lux Estrada, and if you're hearing the sound of my voice, that means that this show, like magic, is for you if you want it. There are a lot of different ways to be more free, and using magic or making space in a spiritual practice in your life can be one of them. As always, I don't speak for anybody but myself. Others can, will, and should disagree with the things that I say sometimes. After all, how will we ever learn if we were all in agreement on all things at all times, after all? And like those who attempt to be reasonable should be willing to do, I often change my opinions about things based on new evidence. Alright, very stoked to be bringing you a great conversation I had with Cynthia Beckert, actor, director, and pagan performer extraordinaire, about the intersections of a magical practice and a theatrical practice. We discuss Cynthia's journey from Catholicism to paganism and the role that goddess spirituality played in that for her. We're also going to be getting into a little bit of Cynthia's work with Dionysus and how this has played out for her as an actor, as well as getting into some of what the actual process of acting is like when looked at from a magical perspective. The way that Cynthia describes the way that she brings a character into being on the stage is very magically powerful and useful, I think, especially for those who are into doing invocation and adjacent types of practices. We also touch on the magical idea that there is a point at which the pantomime or play sort of quickens and becomes real. It's one of the mechanisms of ritual itself, it might be argued, and the stage can be a really excellent venue for this. In the conversation Cynthia and I have, she'll get into the role that the witches in the Scottish play played in her transformation as a witch herself. Cynthia and I will also talk about Hekate and share about some of the work that we've done with her. As a member of the local pagan guild that I'm a part of, Circle of Sublime Elms, I've had some really cool experiences here locally participating in rituals that Cynthia has led, and I'm very stoked to share a little bit about that with you all today, as well as telling you about a ceremony that I'll be leading at the Circle a couple days after this is set to come out, called the Green Sphere, which is a collaborative working with Hekate and the Green Mushroom Hyphosigil Current, which you can be a part of if you want to. There's going to be a link in the show notes with instructions about the remote version of the ritual if you're into participating. I'm really excited about it. Before we get into it here, let me remind you that if you like the show and the other work that I've been getting into, you can support it on Patreon. If you do so, you will be entitled to take a bibliomancy break with me. There are no levels or tiers or whatever, so give as you will. Buy Me a Coffee is an option for those who wish to show their support with a one-time donation but don't want to do the whole Patreon thing. And thank you so much to everybody who's already doing this. Your support really does make this show possible by allowing me to cover the expenses associated with making it, and this allows me to justify to myself the not inconsiderable amount of time that I spend here in production and recording and all of the other shit that goes into this. So I really appreciate the opportunity to be making this thing and to have the resources necessary and everything to do that. So thank you so much to the people who are making that possible. Although I'm a pretty introverted person and I don't use social media very much due to this, it's like kind of a lot and everything. I'm not there like checking on it every day or anything, but that certainly doesn't mean that I don't want to hear from you or anything like that. I'm beyond lucky to have such amazing listeners, collaborators, cohorts, co-conspirators, etc. I always welcome people's thoughts, questions, comments, suggestions, or arcane revelations. You can reach me at luxoccultpod@gmail.com, or you can hit me up on Instagram at luxoccultpod. Alright, I'll be back during a break to give you some updates about the Green Mushroom Project and Void House. And we'll do listener mail and shoutouts after the interview. There's some cool stuff about chaos magic theory, and I guess magical theory in general, that comes up in listener mail, so fuck yeah. Also going to share a track from Fuck Around and Find Out Part 2, We the Hollowed and Green Mushroom Project digital mixtape. But now I am so stoked to present this conversation that I had with Cynthia Beckert. There's a lot of fun and tasty morsels in here for you to enjoy, so I hope that you enjoy listening to it as much as I enjoyed recording it. Alright, cheers! All right, well, my guest today is Cynthia Beckert. Cynthia, how's it going?
It's going great today, Alexa. How are you?
Doing well, doing well. I'm so excited that we're finally recording. We've been talking about this for years, and so I'm stoked that you're finally here.
Yes, I'm excited to be on with you. I've loved your podcast. Loved talking with you ever since we met at our pagan circle. You've always had wonderful ideas, collaborative energy, and I love being a part of that.
Thank you so much. Well, I've also enjoyed and been inspired by working with you at the circle, and yeah, just seeing some of the performance energy that you've brought to some of our ceremonies has really been a huge inspiration in me kind of trying to step out of my shell and bring some of that fun energy as well. So thank you so much for that. And I'm so excited to hear about that journey for you.
Wonderful. Absolutely. So I identify as an actor. That's when I think about myself in my most basic primal sense, performing artist. I've been performing since before I can remember. I've always loved storytelling. I loved when people read stories to me. I loved the oral tradition. I loved acting out stories. I was always acting out my Disney albums, Robin Hood and Alice in Wonderland and Lady and the Tramp, and I was playing all the roles and singing all the songs. I learned my British dialect from mostly from Robin Hood and Disney. But I was allowed to dance as a child. I know a lot of children weren't. I'm very grateful that my parents supported me in performing arts. I started as a dancer and a singer in school choirs, and I was raised Catholic, as many pagans are, I find. I'm a recovered Catholic, but certainly all the smells and bells and the ritual growing up in the Catholic Church and then later the Episcopalian Church led to my desire to be a part of that transcendent experience, to create that for an audience, for a congregation, and for myself. So, been performing forever, and now I'm a professional. I make my living at it here in Orlando. That's one place that you can actually do that. I have worked full time as a performer for over 8 years now, and I'm very grateful. There are a lot of wonderful opportunities here. The theme parks are the obvious choices, but there's a lot of theater and film, a very rich cultural diversity here, a lot of fun projects to get involved in. The ones that I love bringing to our pagan group are dramatizations of Greek myths or of humanizing, bringing to life the stories of the gods and goddesses that we are communing with in our different rituals. So I can go off on a whole tangent on that right now, or we can go back and talk theater growing up or childhood.
Circle back. Yeah, let's circle back to the ritual stuff later because I would love to kind of get really deep into that.
Right. Well, I was raised by my father, who is a German immigrant. His father was a literal rocket scientist that the U.S. government brought over to work on the Saturn missions back in the 50s
Okay.
and 60s. And my dad's a biologist, and he had a very strong reverence for nature and came from the old world, and he was Catholic. But he and his family had actual experiences with the little people, with the fae and the fairy and the leprechaun of the Black Forest when they lived there. And again, my grandfather was a rocket scientist, so he's not making stuff up.
Fascinating.
Yes, the myth and the magic of the old world could live side by side with modern knowledge and science, and that's something that I've always loved about the culture that my father brought to my upbringing. Grew up on Grimm's fairy tales, the Grimm ones, not just the Disney versions. But there was always a harmony that was sought between the characters and nature. And the tragedy in these stories often came from disharmony, from people cutting down the sacred trees or not paying homage to the wise woman of the forest, that sort of thing. So I grew up seeing the birds, the animals, the trees around me as living spirits with as much character and personality as I had. And my father encouraged that. He always taught me that we are a part of this whole ecosystem, this world energy, and that there is no separation. And we depend upon the plants, the animals, the minerals of the earth for our survival, and therefore we must steward them and protect them, not just because it's a nice thing to do to take care of Mother Earth, but for our very survival. I studied science. My first dream was to be an astrophysicist. I remember in second grade writing a book report on Einstein. Like I was hardcore science for a long time until I realized how much math was involved. And I don't have the mind that can make poetry out of math, and I think that's what physics and the higher sciences require. But I loved biology, the biological sciences, learning about cells, learning about the way we are all made of the same stuff, and that just emphasized the sense of energetic unity with the natural world. And I read a lot of these fairy tales. I was enraptured by stories of King Arthur and Excalibur and dragons. And in that myth, there is a lot of magic associated with the land. with the land itself. And Arthur drew the sword from the stone. This analogy I've come to learn meant smelting the ore, the minerals, iron and steel. This was the movement from the Bronze Age into the Iron Age. And Arthur was the one who was able to draw the elements of the earth out to use to rule in the human realm. And he also unified the pagan cultures with the newly emerging Christian culture. And that sense of magic and unity and the natural realm fascinated me. So I began listening to trees. I began as a child, when I was playing outside, I would always put both hands down into the grass and just dig my fingers into the earth and listen. My mother, as quite a green thumb, always had beautiful gardens at our home, and the smell of freshly turned earth is very primally stimulating to me. I love the damp smell of leaves in the autumn. I love the smell of the sun on damp grass, growing things, watching her grow, and to take cuttings of a plant and put it in water with nutrients and see the roots grow from something that looked dead to me, but she was able to find the life in it, bring it back to life, make it flourish. And I was always very aware of the acidity of the soil. Like, we're going to dump the coffee grounds on the bougainvillea to make it be a brighter color, or make sure there's not too much water on this plant because it doesn't like as much, and that different plants are different and have different needs, just like different human beings and different animals. But we all have the same needs for food and water, for nourishment, and for protection in order to thrive. So from both of my parents, I got a good grounding in the beauty and the joy of the natural world. From that, it was kind of at odds, I guess, with my Catholic upbringing in school. The natural world seemed to be very other, very distant. It was a creation of God and out of our realm of understanding. And the physical world was not what we were supposed to focus on in the Catholic Church. We were focused on the next world and the world of the spirit. And I always found that a little sad. I didn't want to leave this world for some celestial heaven. I wanted to enjoy the kingdom of heaven that was at hand, this paradise that we live in. And I think that's where my disconnect with the church began. Certainly being told that as a female I was evil, worthless, bad, that didn't help
Yeah.
very much.
Yeah.
And being the cause of the downfall of nature, I thought, I'm not going to accept that. That's not my role in this world. I saw myself as a young female, as a human, as part of the whole connected network of creation, and no one gender had more guilt or more power than the other. So I always resented that dichotomy and the male aspect of God, the father. My father was fairly stern, so I had a real hard time balancing this idea of the all-caring, all-merciful father with my very strict German dad. A lot of yelling, a lot of strict. There was not unconditional love. Let's put it that way. I didn't sense that I could just be who I was and be accepted. I had to behave. I had to get excellent grades. I had to speak only when spoken to. I was very polite and very well mannered, but often felt inhibited in that patriarchal household. And that's the same kind of oppression that I felt hearing about the Father God in Catholicism. And I always felt that a mother is much more forgiving, much more nurturing, much more connected to the offspring. So I kind of started thinking about the mother that I had heard of was Mother Earth in a large scale sense of motherhood. So I think it was in my early days in Catholic school when I started feeling that disconnect with the patriarchal deity that I really turned further towards the matriarchy and the Mother Earth. And when I realized that there were entire religions and philosophies, ancient ways of life based on communion with the earth and with all living and mineral things, I realized that's really where I was functioning from. My father loved Native American culture. In Germany, as a boy, he said they would play, and they would play America, and they would play Native Americans because that was the most fascinating and exotic and adventurous thing that they could imagine. And his Native American character was named Dear Quickly. He did not have a very good grasp of English at the time when he created that name. It wasn't Dear Running Quickly. It was just Dear Quickly. But I always appreciated his connection with communities that lived in harmony with nature from necessity and from joy. My father exposed me to a lot of history and writing of Native American cultures as a child, and I loved learning about them. I loved the fact that people lived outside, they lived with nature, they moved with the herds of bison, they could call to the birds, they could hunt and use all of the animal, and that they honored any animal or plant that they consumed. That reverence and respect for the circle of life sat very well with me. My father was a hunter. I grew up in Louisiana. Lots of good hunting there. We ate a lot of venison. We ate nutria. I've eaten squirrel. I've eaten possum. And my father did invite me to hunt with him. As a child, he taught me how to shoot and how to safely handle a handgun and a rifle. I'm in grade school at this time.
I learned how to shoot a gun in grade school,
How
too.
to shoot a gun in grade school. Now,
I think it was because I grew up in Colorado.
No, we were very safely in a range in our garage and just using a, low-powered air
I think
cap.
I was on like a rafting trip or something the first time I shot a gun. I don't remember.
I'm actually a pretty good shot. My dad was a sharpshooter in the Army. He was very proud of that. But he always hunted, and he loved being in nature. He didn't have to bring home anything. It was just an excuse, I think, to go out and, spend the weekend in the trees, in the solitude. But everything he killed, we ate.
Mm-hmm.
And I was excited. I was learning how to shoot my rifle, and I was convinced that I could take down a doe. And then he told me that I had to field dress anything I killed. And that's kind of where I drew the line. I didn't think I could handle that, and I won't go into the details.
It's kind of a lot, for people who are familiar with what all you have to do. I mean, especially for a small human, like that's a lot, a lot of work. So, yeah.
Well, we were going to start with turkeys, but even that. This comes back to the idea of being connected to the land, and as a hunter, someone who has a relationship, a very primal relationship with the animals that they are hunting in order to sustain their life and the life of their tribe. I was always very respectful of that relationship. I eat meat that has been hunted. There's a sacrament in that, and I knew that my father and all the hunters he was out with, they always did rituals. When they downed a buck or a doe, you offer it back to the earth.
You leave what you're not going to use for the scavengers. There are, there's etiquette, which is even for people that aren't like spiritual, that I know that there is this etiquette and stuff. And yeah, this is a complicated topic, right? Like I talk to a lot of people who are really uncomfortable with the idea of hunting and things like that, but still choose to eat meat, which I've kind of for me, that would have a lot of cognitive dissonance and stuff. But yeah, I mean, we're living in interesting times where we're kind of disconnected with a lot of our food, not just that which is derived by animals and stuff. And yeah.
That is very true. My father also grew up, he was a refugee after World War II, and they didn't have a lot to eat. They tried to garden in the refugee areas where they were held, but I grew up with a very strong appreciation of any food that was put on my plate, animal or vegetable, and have always eaten mindfully. And that was another gift that both of my parents gave me.
Yeah, and I love this kind of remembering that some of these like simple things like gardening and things like that, these can be privileges that people don't always have access to. And so if you do, have access to a little plot of land, and, why not give it a shot or whatever, right? Like, because yeah, that's something that can bring so much joy and richness to life as well.
Very fulfilling. My mother and I have a small garden out back of our house, and I plant different lettuces and herbs, and I buy the main bulk of the greenery that I eat just because we don't have enough room to produce as much.
Sure, yeah, that's a lot
will
to do.
sustain us.
Yeah.
But I always make a point to go out every day into the garden and pick a few leaves that have grown here from seeds that I cultivated, and I add them to my food, and there's such a joy and a connection that comes with being able to do that. I highly recommend it,
Absolutely.
even if you just have a little window box of herbs. It's a beautiful way to experience the magic of the herbal world.
Absolutely.
I
So I'm
got off
hoping.
track, but I'm gonna
I know,
try to.
it's
I'm gonna
okay. I
give
was
you
gonna
a
say, I'm hoping we could maybe explore how this interest in the natural world and, this budding interest in like goddess spirituality and stuff like that, how did that kind of curtail with your theatric endeavors?
Well, funny you should mention that. When I was an undergrad, I was at college. I My first Shakespeare play was Macbeth. It's still my favorite play to this
The
day,
Scottish play?
and the Scottish play. And
I'm
I was
scandalized that
cast.
you just said that, Cynthia.
No, we're not in a theatrical setting.
Okay,
I
okay. I guess the
respect.
podcast is not technically a theatrical setting.
Oh, I do respect the traditions, and if I am in a theater, I
I'm
will
just
not
teasing.
say the name. But that is very powerful magic too. There's theater magic,
This
and
powerful taboo on this. Yeah, absolutely.
the play is about magic and witchcraft and hubris and pride. And I was playing the first witch, and our director wanted us to find a physical movement and vocal expression for these witches, the three of us who were playing the witches. And so I started doing research. One thing I love about being an actor is it feeds my natural curiosity. I will get a role. Maybe I once played a brain surgeon. It's like, I don't know anything about that. Let me go find out about it. Did a lot of research, read books, watched documentaries. And even though I cannot perform brain surgery, I felt like I understood what it meant to be someone with those skills. So, of course, for the witch, I wanted to find out how to be a witch. So I did all sorts of research. And I remember this was an Episcopalian university that I attended. And this is in the days before the interwebs. So I had to do interlibrary loans and requested books on witchcraft and Satanism and everything else I could think of. And I remember the librarian giving me very strange looks every time I came to pick up something. I specifically looked into dark magic because I wanted to make sure anything we did on stage was not accidentally conjuring something bad. So I wanted to learn a bit about the dark arts, you might say, so that I would be sure that whatever we witches were doing on stage was only. And
Okay, that seems very responsible. Okay, right on.
I thought so. Because I understood the power that we have in theater, that performers have to bring a role to life, to bring the story to life. You are inhabiting that character. You are channeling the character that the playwright has written. You are creating a connection from the past, from the words of the playwright to the present, and you offer what the playwright has written, the story, the emotion, the experience of that play. You channel it into the present, into the lives of the audience who are watching it and experiencing with you in real time. That's something I love about live theater. Film is wonderful for what it can do, but there's nothing like literally being in the room with the actors who are going through those emotions.
Mm.
Human beings are so empathetic. We read body language and scent and facial expression so subtly. And we learn this from our very earliest days. Before we can speak, we are learning how to read and communicate with each other. And when you are in a theater, in a live theater setting, and you are breathing the same air that the actors are exhaling on their lines, they are breathing in your breath, your fear, your delight. You are smelling the pheromones of excitement or fear and love. And you go through all of these experiences in real time and you are changed at a biochemical level. When a human cries, we feel that empathy. We'll tear up as well. And now you have had that experience and it's real in your life because you were in the presence of others who were reenacting a very true human moment. So with all that in mind,
Yeah, beautifully put. I love that. I have chills. Hell yeah.
oh, wonderful. So we witches, oh, we had so much fun. We cast circles on the ground and we had movement that we did and we painted our faces and then we painted Macbeth and the director was just delighted by everything that we brought to life. And it was so freeing and so liberating and so empowering. We were playing these three witches as the pagan power that is coming up against the patriarchal Christian power represented by King Duncan, Macbeth. And through my research for that, trying to find out how the patriarchy and the Christianity stepped all over the native pagan cultures, the research that I did for that production of Macbeth led me to a whole other world of Anglo-Celtic Saxon mythology. Okay.
So, were there some things that were like really influential in terms of aesthetics or anything like that that you found that like really worked for you?
I loved everything about the Celts and the Saxons. I was such an Anglophile,
Yeah,
such
you
a
mentioned the
Celtophile.
Arthurian myths. Yeah, which
Yes.
when they were sort of like revisited in the Victorian era, I think there was a lot of like
Mhm.
romance and stuff that was added to. There's a lot of layers and there's a lot of interesting things about them there for sure.
And I'll tell you one thing that really clicked me into that whole aesthetic and the reality of paganism was the Showtime series Robin Hood, starring Michael Praed. This was out in mid 80s, and I was a huge fan of this. And Robin Hood was Saxon. He was of the native people of Britain before the Normans. The French came and took over with the Norman invasion, 1066. And one of the characters in this TV series, along with Robin and all of his merry men, was Herne the Hunter, was a priest who lived in the woods and embodied the spirit of the forest god, Herne the Hunter, Cernunnos. And he would appear at certain pivotal moments in the story and he presided over the wedding of Robin and Marian. And that image of them out in the forest, in the field, being joined by this horned priest under the stars just struck me as the most beautiful, the most fulfilling, the most romantic image of union I could ever imagine. And though I've never been married and probably won't marry, if I ever did get married, it would be in a stone circle in Ireland. That's the power and the ancientness of the connection. And it's the marriage of the earth, of the land and the people, the land and the king. The king marries the land. The king joins to Mother Earth in order to protect and prosper the people. And
Hmm.
that was always the way I always saw Arthur as sort of that warrior priest who was bringing the ancient traditions of being close to the earth to the modern ideology of governments were shaping up. The world was getting smaller and kingdoms were getting bigger, I guess. I loved that the Arthurian legends and the Celtic tradition were still so connected to the earth. And that's where my attraction, first grew. And that was always the path that I stuck with. Like if I think of an aesthetic, I mean, I want to, paint some blue war paint across my face like a peck and wear a hand woven linen robe with raven feathers and bear fur and like the Native American cultures in America, the indigenous cultures who are so connected to the natural world that they embody it, they live it, they dress it, they communicate with it. There is no separation. There is no us and them. There is only we. That went another tangent. You want to bring
So
me back on track?
I'm kind of curious, I love what you're saying about how theater can be this really potent channel for magic. And if there's people listening who are curious about bringing some of this theatric energy into their ritual, I know you've directed people in the past and everything. I'm wondering if you could give us some pointers about, ways to kind of tap into some of this energy.
Absolutely. It's all about mindfulness and intent. I had an art class somewhere where they asked, it was sort of a joke. It's like, what is art? And
I don't know, but
my
I know it
answer,
when I see it. It's the same as porn, right?
exactly,
I'm not
exactly.
sure, but I know it when I see it.
But the answer that I came up with at the end of that class was art is intention. It is an intentionality. It is doing something with a thought in order to create an outcome or experience. And acting is often described as behaving naturally in imaginary circumstances.
Mm.
Some people say, oh, actors are liars. No, we are truth tellers. Actors are the most truthful when they are portraying a character or telling a story. And Dionysus, of course, one of my favorite Greek gods. I grew up on Greek mythology just as much as Aesop's fables and the Brothers Grimm. So all of these deities and what they represented were very important to my upbringing. Of course, Dionysus. I had my own ancient Greek patron saint of theater and performance growing up. And Dionysus is technically the god of transformation. We think of Dionysus as being the god of wine, certainly, and revelry. But all of that was under the far reaching umbrella of transformation. The
Mm.
grapes are transformed into wine. When we drink the wine, we are transformed from our daily consciousness to an expanded consciousness. When we perform theater, the actors are transformed into the characters. The audience is transformed by experiencing what the actors are going through. So I always loved Dionysus, felt very supported by them. And in my high school, this was a Episcopalian high school, prep school, our theater club was called Dionysus and Company, which I thought was beautiful because Dionysus is the god of theater, and we felt like we were priests of the theater. The priests, the Episcopalian priests of the diocese taught at the school, and they also performed with us in the plays and musicals. They were amazing. You'll find many, many Episcopalian priests are musically and theatrically inclined. And actually, there was a period of time when I thought I might be an Episcopalian priest once I realized that Episcopals allowed women to serve as priests. I loved the idea of transforming people, bringing them on this journey to
Mm.
wholeness, a journey to connect with this God energy that is
Mm.
so easily experienced. But then I realized I don't really believe in that technical aspect of God, and
Wasn't the
probably wouldn't
quite
be.
quite the right glove for your hand or whatever.
Exactly. But theater was the perfect. On the opening night of the play, the chaplain, the priest, would serve a Eucharist, the bread and wine. We would have a brief Christian ceremony, and he would serve the bread off of the play script. Like that was the
Hmm.
plate that served up the body of Christ. And there was a McDonald's very nearby, and we would always get whatever logo cup was, available at the time, and that became like the cup for rehearsal, and you'd go get your free refills, and we would serve the communion wine out of this McDonald's cup. And
Interesting. Okay, so there's
it
all
was,
these like little rituals that this club
yeah,
would have. This little
exactly. And the
cult of
priest,
Dionysus, if you will.
indeed. And this priest, he was an adult. He was, a power figure in the society, in the school, in the church. And he came to our opening night to perform this ceremony out of respect for us and what we were doing as 13, 14, 16-year-olds. And I felt so wonderfully empowered. There is a beautiful prayer maybe I will look it up to get it right, but it's in the Episcopalian prayer book, and it's a prayer for artists. We thank you for your servants who through art and music seek to do you praise. Something, words to that effect, but it was an honor given to performers, to musicians, to actors, to dancers, to visual artists, because it was recognized that their contributions were so important to the appreciation of life. So that was when I felt pretty seriously that I was an actual priest of Dionysus. And when I performed, starting, as a freshman in high school, I developed rituals before going on stage that would help me to remain mindful. You always want to be present, be in the moment on stage. You don't want to be thinking about something else. You want to be really present so that the audience experiences that reality with you. Because an audience can tell. They can tell if you're not really feeling it, if you're not really there. So it serves the story best to always be present. So I would do rituals. I always kiss the stage. If I have the opportunity to work on the stage before the opening night, like if I'm doing my stretches or yoga or something, then I can actually put my face down and I will kiss the stage. If that would be taken as a little weird by the other people that I'm performing with, I always kiss my hand and touch the stage and connect it, honor it. I do little rituals. I wear a little pendant with Dionysus on it. Somewhere in my costume, always tuck that in to be reminded of what I'm doing and that it is important. Oh my God, a beautiful red hawk just flew by my window. That was exquisite. I love
it.
when I get messages like that. Hail Horus. Any hootie. But as a director, there are very few people that I have worked with as a professional director or even as a professional actor who I know are as open and comfortable about the pagan aspect of their lives as I am. So I don't often direct as a priest of Dionysus, but I will encourage people that I'm working with to be honest, to be present, to really feel what they're feeling and share that on stage in order to make this performance the best that it can be. There's that famous quote from Hamlet, "The play is the thing." And I always come back to that, a story that we are all trying to come together to create. And the full experience of the story, of the play, is not just the words the playwright has written. It is not just play that the actors rehearse. It is not just the play that the actors perform. And it is not just the play that the audience hears. It is all of those things combined. And when we are part of that whole, part of the whole process, and we see it from beginning to end, we are more reverential. We are more sacred in our actions and in our duties. And that reminds me of being connected, being consciously connected to the natural world, being connected to all things. So anytime I can encourage people on stage to really connect with one another, to empathize and to be one. We talk about ensemble, to be part of one body when you're performing. There are many actors, but we are all part of one whole, telling the story that is a whole. So in that sense, I do try to bring that reverence, my Dionysian priesthood, to my directing and to my acting.
Love that. Yeah, this is making so much sense to me.
3, Romeo, 2, 4, Yankee, Romeo, 7, Bravo, Delta, Quebec.
Greetings. It's me, Luxa from the future. We're going to be getting back to my conversation with Cynthia Beckert in just a little while here, including a discussion about how Hekate came into both of our lives and more. It's a really cool story. Cynthia goes into her views about how the human interacts with the divine and what this has to do with theater and ritual. It's really fucking cool stuff. Stoked to share it. If you're into theater, I wanted to let you know about a couple of episodes that would be great companions to this one. You'll find links to these in the show notes. Number 10, Ritual Performance in Theater with Dr. Rob C. Thompson from Occult Confessions and the Dark Pool is a place where we get into some of this. We talk a little bit about Shakespeare in this one, and if you're interested in Shakespeare, I would recommend checking out the recent episode that we put out of Ad Hoc History with special guest Derek Hunter about the Shakespeare authorship question. Controversial stuff here. You can also hear Derek in episode 75, Psychoanalysis and the Cut-Up Technique with Dr. Vanessa Sinclair, and Anonymous Agnostic Antichrist with Derek Hunter, which is the title of Derek's book about Shakespeare, and perhaps the group of people responsible for the Shakespeare canon. Speaking of the cut-up technique, let me go ahead and move into green mushroom updates and let you know that on June 23rd, we'll be discovering the 23rd and final book of our 23 Bibliomancy scripture, which is a sort of giant cut-up project that we've been constructing for the last 22 months. We'll be doing the usual ritual, and then we'll talk about the cut-up technique, the work of Temple of Psychic Youth, and a lot more as we celebrate the discovery of our 23rd and final book. If you'd like to participate in that, grab the book that you think would like to participate and join us for the fun. There's lots of fun and free activities planned in the Green Machine Discord server as usual, home of the Green Mushroom Hypho Sigil Project. Join us for our weekly Fungal Friday voice chats about different magical topics. It's also a great place to come to ask questions if you're new, because we have a lot of people who are into sharing about what's worked for them and their practices and theory and all kinds of other shit like that. We have a monthly rune study group and a book club in which we're very slowly kind of digesting Six Waves by Aidan Wachter, as well as a new experiment which we're starting called Void House, which is about creating a consent-forward magical space in which to do more personal or serious group work in, and for investigating the alchemical and magical properties of consent itself. I think there's a lot there. We're super stoked to be offering some free consent education surrounding magic and ritual and all of the rest of it coming up this fall. You can check out a bonus episode between episode 80 and 81 of this show to see a little video presentation that I made about all this stuff. Green Mushroom Project is something that I first began working on back in the summer of 2020 amid what felt like a sort of rising tide of hatred and fear and panic. I really wanted to find some way to push back against this current. And doing some research and meditation and everything, I kind of conducted the preliminary steps and approached some friends with the idea of, what we could do. And in October of that year, me and some others launched the magical operation kind of in earnest on Halloween. So the four main objectives of the Green Mushroom Hypho Sigil project are to create a network of, green, in quotes, or perhaps Venus aspected magic for practitioners to draw upon for healing and restorative works. I do want to note with that Venusian tide, though, that I think that there's also some Saturnian stuff going on with the mushrooms' connection with death and everything, but I won't get off track here. The second objective is building and strengthening community and empowering the individuals within it. The third is to strengthen our position against hate groups and other bullshit through solidarity. And the fourth is to encourage individuals to use powerful tech, magical tech in specific, to become more agentic. Now, looking back on things about 4 years later, it's really rad to be able to, say that we have accomplished and are continuing to accomplish these things, so fuck yeah. For added context, the Green Mushroom Project works with a biological metaphor of vascular arbuscular mycorrhizae fungi. These are mushrooms that live in mutual symbiosis with trees. The metaphor here is that if we, the magical practitioners who work with the sigil or the current associated with the project, are like a forest of trees, the green mushroom is like the underground mycelial network that connects us and strengthens us, allows us to exchange information, and all of the rest of what that can offer. It's been a pretty fucking rad magical ally, and I'm really happy to be continuing to explore what our work will look like together. I'm going to read the Green Mushroom Project Statement of Resistance for you at the end of the episode, as is my custom, and I will share a bit about the ritual that will be using both the green mushrooms current as well as calling upon the goddess Hekate, which is something that I'll be running and which Cynthia will be helping out with after we get done with the interview. Speaking of which, let's get back to it. Here's the rest of my conversation with Cynthia Beckert. Hey, what's up? I'm Luxa.
And I'm Josh. Are you looking for a chill place to hang out online and chat about chaos magic, occultism, witchcraft, and more? Are you hoping to learn and share your knowledge and experience in a place that is welcoming to folks of all different backgrounds and identities?
If so, check out the Green Machine Discord server, home of the Green Mushroom Project. Our growing community of chaotes, occultists, sorcerers, witches, and weirdos has all kinds of fun and interesting things going on. From chats and rituals to workshops, clubs, and more. There's a lot of cool opportunities to get involved.
Sounds great, Luxa. How can folks find us?
Well, for now, we're keeping things pretty small as we grow, so we're not advertising on any of the Discord services that do that. But folks can hit me up and I will send them a link. You can reach me at luxoccultpod@gmail.com, or you can find me on Instagram at luxoccultpod.
Fuck yeah!
Fuck yeah. Hey, it's Luxa from the Lux Occult podcast. I want to tell you about a new update to the trinary sigil generator at chaostarot.com. The bulk of this update was for normie shit like design, navigation, logic, and user experience, which was long overdue, I'm told. Each tool has a new About page, in case the tech is new to you. You'll also notice each tool has its own URL now, so you can link to exactly what you want. There are also options for dark mode, left-handed navigation, and accessibility font for dyslexia. Cheers! Some of the existing tools got feature updates along the same lines, with new options for tarot and runes, a mobile-friendly word method, full steps for all the rituals, and some background images for your sigils. Also, all the random elements have been updated to use the Mercenary Twister algorithm. Now, it wouldn't be an update without adding a few new tools, so in keeping with the normie theme, most of them involve subverting more common concepts for use in occult workings. We've got playing cards, a coin toss, a magic 8-ball, dice rollers, dice divination, a lotto picker, keyboard sigils, Morse code, Braille, NATO phonetic, sign language, Zener cards, Android Dreams Tarot, the 8-circuit model of consciousness, and also in the mix is the Green Mushroom Project Statement of Resistance. So that's just the new stuff. Trinary has a bunch of other tools as well that I use all the time. Go and check it out. It's a fun and free way to fuck around and find out. Because some of the interesting sort of transformative events that I've experienced like just recently at the circle were definitely at your hand, right? Like I remember early on in my investigations of the current line of deity work that I'm doing, like I was kind of meeting a lot of different goddesses. I was hanging out with a lot of different, people as it were, exploring these different mythologies, just sort of trying to investigate what this general concept of goddessness sort of was in a big picture sense. And, as Hekate likes to do, she came through so strong for me. Yeah, and it's such an important moment in my life that you were the facilitator of. And so, yeah, thank you so much for that. And I'm hoping that we can talk a little bit about Hekate, because this is something that I know is an intersection in our work. And you and I have participated in rituals that we've worked with her in and things like that. And so how does this story start for you?
Oh, this is one of my favorite stories of how life just brings you to the perfect moment. Working at the Elms, creating rituals for our pagan circle. There are many theatrically inclined individuals in our circle. Mm-hmm. And a couple of us started out doing the Persephone, Hades, Demeter, Hekate story for Maven, for the change of the seasons and the solstice, the equinox. And it started out, it was just going to be, here, you're going to be Demeter and you're going to say these lines, and you're going to be Persephone and you're going to say these lines. And the more we wrote and the more we worked on it, bigger it got. It turned into a full-blown production with curtains and music and entrances and exits and lines and costumes. And it was one of the most magical and fulfilling theatrical experiences that I've ever had, and was a big success, was enjoyed a lot by the members of the circle. And the thing that people thought was so moving was that they could identify with these deities as real beings, not just an eye in the sky kind of something on paper, but here's Demeter, who's a real mother who is mourning the loss of her child. Here is Hades being belittled by his brother Zeus and being left alone and desiring a partner. These were real beings with real feelings. And I realized that was an excellent way for people to commune with the divine. Man creates God in their image. Humans create God in their image. But they are the divine part of us. We pull it out of ourselves and hold it apart and study it in order to learn about our own nature and how to best function in this reality. But somewhere along the line, when we pulled this divinity from ourselves to consider it, we put it up on a pedestal and we left it there. And we separated that divinity from ourselves and we called those gods. And so we are still trying to learn from that divine aspect of ourselves, but we're learning from way over there. We think the knowledge comes from a deity, and really that sense of divine came out of us. So bringing these deities to life in a theatrical setting, in a ritual, was my way to remind us that these are all part of us. All of these gods, all of these goddesses, all of this divine nature and power has its beginnings and endings in us. So bringing these deities to our lives became a very important quest for me.
Mm.
I studied Hekate. Of course, she is the witch, the queen of the witches, and she is mentioned in Macbeth. It is said that, suggested that Shakespeare didn't include her originally, but King James loved witches and witchcraft so much that perhaps an editor somewhere along the line added a whole scene with her, because there is a scene where Hekate comes down and says, "You're starting the party without me. I need to help you out." And they cast this.
Let me get in on this.
Exactly. So I had heard of Hekate, or Hecate as it scans in iambic pentameter.
Mhm.
And then when I was working on the Eleusinian mysteries of Persephone and Demeter, Hecate plays an important role. She shows up and is the mediator, is able to travel between the worlds, from the world of the living to the underworld, to communicate with Persephone, to bring messages from her mother Demeter, and also to facilitate the eventual release of the season of the spring. And then I started seeing Hecate everywhere. She was showing up in music, like titles of songs on my Pandora playlist, like 4 in a row. And I'm like, this is a little odd and noteworthy. Different podcasts that I was listening to would start to mention her, and they would be historic podcasts or mythology podcasts, not even pagan podcasts. And the more I read about her, the more intrigued I became. She is a type. She is the aunt of Zeus. She is of the old way, from the very, very beginnings of time.
Mhm.
And she is the one Titan who survived. She fought on the side of the Olympian gods in favor of protecting the earth and humankind, who were connected and owed their prosperity, I suppose, to the Olympians. And when I found that she is the Dark Mother, the powerful queen of all, it resonated very deeply with me that she was that essence of Earth Mother that is not just the beautiful green on the surface, but the molten lava at the center and the vast cold brilliance of space. She encompassed all these things in my mind. And I did research on her, found out all of her Greek origins, but then she has faces in many different cultures. And it occurred to me that this was, I'm even having trouble putting this into words, that she is the all. She is all for me. And I kept feeling called to her. The more research, the more response I did. And I had an emotional breakdown. A lot of things became clear to me on one particular night. And I remember crying and wailing and screaming, and the word catharsis kept coming up. This was definitely a transformation of old pain and discomfort. And I was coughing and wailing, and at the bottom of a breath, before I inhaled, I had this incredible vision of being deep in a cave in the earth and being as large as the earth and surrounded by other figures, other titans who were planet-sized. And I was in the presence of Hekate, who was even greater than all of them. And I was standing at the center of this moving, swirling mass of beings, and there was torchlight, and I was being elevated and celebrated and recognized as divine. in the presence of these other divinities and in the presence of the goddess Hekate. And my chest expanded, my guts, my belly, everything opened out. And I remember in that next inhale, I laughed and I laughed and I felt free. I felt light. I felt made of stone. I felt firm. I felt solid. I felt big enough to encompass the universe and yet intimately connected as a human being with Hekate as my understanding and expression of the divine. And a few days later, there was a full lunar eclipse. And I realized that I was being called to dedicate myself to Hekate. And I did a little research, but I didn't feel called to do anything in any way that anybody in the past had done. But I made offerings that I hear in the Homeric hymns that she would like. I laid out a blanket in my front yard and I prayed to Hekate during the entirety of the lunar eclipse, and the moon turned red and I felt her presence, and it was potent, it was real, it was immediate, there was no time, it was all now, it was a God moment, it was pure divinity, and I have been connected with her ever since, and she is my source and my soul and my grounding. And through her, I experience many other aspects of divinity. There are other aspects that I adore, like Lord Ganesh, and all of them have a place within her circle, within the grandness that she is. But that is my story of how I came to Hekate.
Oh yeah, I love that. That's so beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. Hail Hekate.
Hail Hekate. Oh, and another thing, the image that I saw when I was in the cave and there was the swirling around me and there was a pattern and I was standing in the center and there was torchlight, I drew that pattern. And then months later in my research, I found the strophalos of Hekate, Hekate's wheel.
Oh, okay, cool.
That was the pattern that I saw in my vision before I had ever seen that image.
That's beautiful. I fucking
saw
love
it and I drew it and then found it later and realized that that was her symbol. And that just kind of blew my mind a little bit.
Yeah, I love that. And it sounds just like her. She definitely, she's blown my mind a couple times for sure.
And so with our circle, being able to present rituals that embody these deities, I felt called to do an Hekate ritual, and I was very interested in her aspect, Hekate Triformis, the three-faced goddess. And I was feeling very into my crone self. I just turned 50 and was feeling all that grounded, powerful magic. So I said, I will embody the crone. I'll find two other members of our circle to embody the mother and the maiden. And we each invested and investigated and wrote about the three different aspects of Hekate Triformis and created a ritual where we became the goddess. We had torches, we had ropes, we had keys. We led the circle through a guided meditation with their eyes closed. And then when their eyes were closed, the three of us assembled in the center of the circle. And when they opened their eyes, they beheld Hekate Triformis. And we rotated in a circle and we each spoke different prayers and praise that we had created for her. And it was a very powerful and energetic transformation, the spirit of Hekate to the people who were celebrating the ritual. And she has been very close to me ever since then.
Fuck yeah, that's so cool. I love it. So, Cynthia, is there anything that I haven't asked you about that you would like to talk about? Is there any projects that you would like to plug or any questions that you have to ask me or anything like that?
One of my recent projects, and it's a big project for a big company and it's a big intellectual property, so I'm going to be very vague about it. But I was able to recently, in the past couple of years, embody a character, a very spiritual character, who was able to share knowledge, wisdom, and connection, to celebrate our connection with the energy of all life, that energy that surrounds us and penetrates us and binds the galaxy together, you might say.
Okay.
In an
Yeah,
immersive
there's like a
theater
force that
experience.
emanates
Some
throughout
sort of
the
force
universe
that
that
emanates. Yeah. I was able in a immersive theatrical environment to portray a character whose focus was bringing people into connection with this living force. And I felt it was the culmination of all my spiritual journeys as well as my theatrical endeavors.
that's
Uh,
very fun. Very
yeah.
fun. I love it.
I hope that that experience will return in some way in future. But if you can follow the breadcrumbs, you can find out about the people that I portrayed and their path. And I highly recommend that, because I think that's really where things are going. That's where my new spirituality is focusing. It's a way to share this sense of connection with the world, because that desire for connection already exists, and the language to describe that energetic connection already exists.
I love
And
it. Yeah.
we are finding ways to make people aware that we are actually all walking the same path, all worshiping the same connection.
I like the
So that's
idea
something I'm
of
excited
doing,
about.
yeah, I like the idea of doing some pop culture magic at the circle. I think
Yeah.
something like this could be really fun. Pop culture magic is something that we're into doing with the Mushroom Project. Sometimes we did something for John Carpenter's They Live that we're going to be revisiting soon. And like these modern myths are sometimes more accessible to the modern mind, and that sometimes there's analogs for concepts that have been important to humans forever. So this can be a really like fun and engaging way to handle all that and wear fun costumes or whatever it
Oh,
is,
yes.
right?
Well, I mean, we had our recent Beltane celebration on
Yes.
May 4th, and there was a
Yeah,
lot
shout
of,
out to Joe and Chelsea at Weird Road made an amazing costume.
oh,
So freaking cool. I'm gonna post some pictures of that on Instagram.
it was wonderful. And I have been toying with the idea of creating a ritual that includes divine characters that are showcased in the hero's journey in the Star Wars saga.
I love
So
that.
look
Yeah, that
forward
sounds
to
really
doing a
cool.
Star Wars ritual at some point.
Yes, I think we should. I think that sounds very fun. And yeah, I think that would be very popular, especially here locally. There's a lot of enthusiasm for all that, for sure.
Well, there's a project I'm currently in a production of To Kill a Mockingbird
Oh,
at
rad.
Theater West Inn in Sanford, and that is a beautiful play that uses the magic of theatricality. I play Jean Louise Finch, the scout, as a grown-up, and I narrate the play. I bring the audience into the play, and they observe the play as my memory.
That's
So
so
I am a
cool.
conduit between the present and the past, and certainly the themes in that play are very important now to resonate
Hmm.
with us. And I feel very much like a priest of Dionysus doing that play. There's a show that I want to do, a play called Hurricane Diane, that is by Barbara Harris, which the main character is Dionysus, who's returned in the modern day as a lesbian landscaper. And
I
she is
love this
here
for Dionysus.
to, yes, and she's here to save the world from climate disaster by involving a group of 4 suburban housewives to join her Maenad ritual and fight off the powers of destruction that are embodied in the form of a literal hurricane named Diane that's rolling in. Hilarity and divinity ensues. I'm hoping to be able to produce that here in Orlando soon. I will definitely keep you posted. But I love the way it's in the zeitgeist now. Artists are looking to the myths of the past, the connections that we used to have to our divine nature and the natural world, and bringing them into modern artistic creations and stories, because we really need it.
I love that. Cynthia, thank you so much for taking the time to hang out with me today. Where can listeners like find your work and stuff? Like, is there a place where people can keep up with you?
Oh goodness. I'm real old fashioned. I'm still on Facebook. I have an Instagram profile, but I haven't I don't think I have
Okay.
even one post. You can Google me and see what's going on. Find me on Facebook. If we have friends in common, you can request a friend
Yeah, and if you're
add.
local here at Orlando, come hang out at the Circle. We're actually going to be doing a ritual on June 8th here coming up pretty soon, which is going to be a collaborative thing. I'm going to be leading it. It's actually going to involve Hekate and the green mushroom current, and it's going to be a really cool, kind of high-powered ceremony. It's going to be similar
Heck
to,
yeah.
yeah, it's going to be similar to one that I did around this time of year last year. But this is going to be a sort of updated and maybe like more, expanded version of it. So I'm really stoked about that. And so yeah, come hang out with us. We're always getting up to something and everything. So yeah.
Fantastic. Oh, I love talking with you, Lexa. Thank you so much. I feel so energized, invigorated. I have a performance of Mockingbird tonight, and I have a feeling it's going to be a really, really good show.
Fuck yeah, I'm sure it will be. Actually, you know what? I wanted to mention I was in that play when I was a kid, and it was a really important story to me, and I really appreciate that. Very cool.
Oh, what a great
All
connection.
right, well, break a
Beautiful,
leg
beautiful.
tonight, and thank you so much. This has been really inspirational. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely a pleasure, my friend.
Oh,
Blessed
any
be.
last words of advice or parting thoughts for the listeners and I?
Any separation that you feel, any anger, loneliness, fear, it's an illusion. We are always one energetic being. We will always be one energetic being. We are not separate. There is no otherness. There's only us, all together as one.
Fuck yeah. Thank you so much.
You are welcome, my friend.
All right, thanks so much to Cynthia. There's a lot of really magically useful stuff in what she shared about the process of acting and what it means to perform for an audience. There were so many subtle components that she mentioned that I don't think I'd ever considered before. It's been really cool learning about the intersections of performance and ritual through doing more sort of like public rituals. And Cynthia has been both an inspiration and a teacher to me in terms of how to fill the role of the priest or priestess or priestix or other assorted term for the person who stands at the front and says the stuff and does the things or orchestrates that process. I'm really excited about the ceremony that the members of the Circle of the Sublime Elms will be conducting for the annual Witches' Ball in October. Pretty cool. We've got some very fun and theatrical ideas for what that's going to look like. I'll share more about that in the future. Also really stoked about the Green Sphere, which is the ceremony with Hekate and the green mushroom that I mentioned earlier, and which Cynthia and others from the Circle of Sublime Elms will be helping out with. Shout out to everybody who will be assisting with that, and big thanks to Justin for making it possible. Really planning to bring that performance energy and make it a cool night to remember. Fuck yeah. I'll share a little bit more about that in just a moment. We're going to be getting into some listener mail and shoutouts, including a great question and some other observations about sigil magic and magical theory in just a second here. Let me go ahead and take this opportunity to remind you, though, that if you like the show and you're into what we've got going on here, you can support it on Patreon, which will entitle you to receive a bibliomancy reading from me. Making this show is, as you might suspect, a pretty wild amount of work, especially for just one intrepid podcaster. But it means a lot to be able to do it. Thank you so much to the people who are making it possible by giving on Patreon or Buy Me a Coffee, and to the people who are supporting the show by spreading the word. Tell your friends, your allies, and your magical associates about it, as well as everyone you meet at the next SBOT, seance, coven meeting, or ceremonial potluck you attend. You can also post about it on social media or write a positive review or give it stars where that's possible. These things are all very helpful, so thank you so much to everybody who is doing that. And yes, don't forget to smash the fucking shit out of that follow button or alarm thing or whatever it is on your app so that you can get updates when a new episode comes out. Alright, let's do listener mail and shoutouts. All right, shout out to Josh, who wrote me with a great question about sigil magic, which I will now paraphrase. How does one keep a good record of what you have going on in your magical practice in terms of synchronicities and all the rest of it in the form of a journal, while also doing the whole charge it and forget it thing with sigils? Like, how does this work? Because it does seem kind of counterintuitive, right? So this is what I wrote back. This is a great question. I think it really depends on how a person thinks. I find that I can keep a record of sigils I create in a book, and if I don't look at them for a while, I'll eventually forget what they mean sometimes. I've also found that it's not always necessary to forget them at all. Putting hard and fast rules on this stuff doesn't really work because it's going to depend a lot on the person and how they think. That's why experimenting and seeing what works for you can be so helpful. But in order to get to a place where people feel comfortable doing that, they have to be able to give themselves permission to do things, quote, their way, which is something we're not usually encouraged to do in a lot of learning scenarios. So there's like a lot of negative pressure against it, perhaps. Giving yourself permission to not follow the, quote, rules that people have made up about forgetting or doing other things very specific ways is a sort of self-initiation that a lot of magicians have to go through in order to figure out how their magic works. So fuck yeah, I hope that's helpful, Josh. Thank you so much for writing, and thank you so much for listening. Shout out to the Consent Academy. Check out their work at theconsentacademy.com if you are curious to learn more about consent. And shout out to all of the Pocket Wizards. It was really rad being in that consent workshop with some of you the other day and hearing all the cool questions and shit that you all brought up. Made me really fucking proud to be doing the work that we're doing and to be working with all of you, honestly. Fuck yeah. Super stoked to be hanging out with some of you and getting fucking weird with it in the Pacific Northwest soon. Perhaps the haunted sex guitar will indeed be a thing of reality soon. We will see. Big thanks to Sorfratter for designing a travel servitor using the Green Mushroom's Saprotroph template, which I had the pleasure of testing last weekend when I went to Chicago. It's one of the smoothest trips I think I've ever been on. Gratitude to Sorfratter and to Fizz. I'm going to post a video that I made for working with the thing on Instagram in case you want to check that out. If all of what I just said was really confusing, a servitor is a magical helper. The semantics get a little bit sticky, but you can check out episode 7 of this show, Thought Forms, Hypersigils, and the Astral Temple, aka Explaining Chaos Magic to My Brother Part 3, to learn a little bit more about that. But basically, these magical helpers are either created or recruited, depending on one's outlook, to assist with various tasks. So we created a template for making these things, which uses the Green Mushroom's current as a way of potentially making the process easier for new people. Although I'm not sure if it actually is easier. Sometimes when I set out to make something easy and simple, it ends up being super fucking complicated. Anyway, you can check out thegreenmushroomproject.com to read more about the saprotrophs, which are the special servitors or magical helpers, as I mentioned. And you can learn how to make one for yourself, or you can ask about it on the Discord server as well. Alright, shout out to Johnny Nada, who has this awesome fucking observation about magic that I wanted to share with y'all, because it's fire. A thing about magic people don't understand is that even practical, results-based magic is fundamentally acausal. If I do a ritual to get the money to pay a bill, it isn't that I think the ritual will literally cause someone or something to give me money. That would be silly. But I do think that, having had the experience of doing the ritual, I'm now much more likely to have the experience of the bill being paid. This seems like a semantic point I'm making, but I promise you it's not. This is actually the great secret underpinning of the whole thing. Any asshole can do magic if they understand this. Alright, cheers. Thank you, Johnny Nada, and thank you to everybody who wrote in. If you would like to send thoughts, questions, comments, suggestions, arcane revelations, whatnot, you can find me at luxoccultpod@gmail.com or get me on Instagram at luxoccultpod. And thank you so much to everybody who sent in missives that did not make it into today's listener mailbag. It is not always possible to get all of the ones that I want in there or to shout out all of the people that I appreciate, but I definitely appreciate all of you, so thank you so much. Alright, a little bit more about the green sphere, which is, again, the thing I'm going to be running with Cynthia and others at the Circle of the Sublime Elms this weekend. So we're going to be raising a growing sphere of protection. I'm going to paraphrase the statement of intent for you here, which will encompass those participating in this thing, as well as children and those who might be particularly vulnerable due to shifting political tides, or other factors which put them at higher risk. We're going to ask that those in need be sheltered from hatred and harm and given the healing and resources they require, and we're going to ask that pathways for peace be opened in small ways that lead to larger ones until all within the green sphere are protected and healed. In addition to some of the more traditional offerings that you would find at a Hekatean Deipnon, or a new moon offering feast for Hekate, I'm going to be serving watermelon as a libation. This is going to be a collaborative working that remote participants can also take part in. Check out the show notes to find a link to instructions for the simple remote version of the ritual. It's suitable for practitioners of any experience level and can be done alone or in a group. Shout out to everybody who's going to be assisting with that here locally, planning to bring that performance energy and make it a really fucking cool night to remember. And shout out to everybody who's going to be rocking the remote version of the ritual. If you're planning to do it and you get the chance to take pictures, I'd really love to see them. luxoccultpod@gmail.com or at luxoccultpod on Instagram. Much love and much love to everybody participating in the Green Mushroom Project, regardless of what that looks like for you in your practice. I will now bid you adieu after reading the Green Mushroom Project Statement of Resistance. Whatever it looks like to you. Remember to resist. Resist by maintaining sovereignty of the self. Resist by maintaining love of the self. Resist by maintaining fierce loyalty to love and pleasure. Resist with acts of radical kindness. Focus on the path to better times. Fuck yeah. Thanks so much to Cynthia for joining me and sharing her thoughts, and for her magical assistance. Hail Hekate. Thanks to everybody who contributed tracks to the Green Mushroom Project and We the Hollowed digital mixtape Fuck Around and Find Out Part 2, which I will be sharing a track with you shortly. Thanks to everyone who's been helping, both seen and unseen. And most of all, thanks to you for listening. This is Lux Estrada, reminding you to stay strong and stay fucking curious. Alright, this is Autumnal Brews in the Bellows by Dude It's Null. Cheers.
Lux Occult is part of the Green Mushroom Podcast Network.